Home is more than our things or just a place. It protects those we love. It holds memories. Home is often our heart, but something is happening to our home. Earlier this year, homes on a beach near Boston were condemned and then demolished because of sea level rise. Similar harsh realities are unfolding in New York, New Jersey, North Carolina, Louisiana, South Florida, California, and even far from the coasts, chronic flooding, droughts, heat waves, and devastating wildfires destroy homes and even entire towns. Oh, and at our southern border, the migrants seeking a new life in America, a lot of them are coming here to escape climate change, which is magnifying the effect of hurricanes and famine back at their home. A National Intelligence Council report from early April predicts it's all only gonna get worse, amplified by global political instability, an avalanche of climate refugees, and even impacts on America's military readiness. This is a lot to take in. Our country and our world, they're gonna look a lot different than they do today. And that'll probably happen faster than any of us are ready for. I mean, the changes are already in the news, but it can be difficult to see the big picture if you're not looking for the patterns. And that's what I hope this story helps with, as unsettling as that might be, because we just can't keep ignoring the truth about what is already happening.
Climate migration is ongoing now. This isn't just a future theory.
Jesse Keenan at Tulane University is one of the world's leading experts on what's known as climate migration.
And by the way, we're already seeing this in Arizona. So there's a lot of people that are leaving southern Arizona and they're crowding out the real estate and housing markets in northern Arizona where it's much cooler in the mountains. This is my idea of climate gentrification, right? And in that process, people who are there get crowded out because rents go up, housing prices go up, et cetera, et cetera.
And this climate gentrification, just to be clear, it's gonna happen in part because there are places in America where we just can't live anymore. Neighborhoods or entire cities.
These places already exist. We already have a pretty good idea of where these places are, particularly in many places in coastal America. We will not be able to live in these places. We have built to the edge of abyss in many places in this country.
So what does that look like? Well, there are an increasing number of models and studies and projections of how many Americans move and where they move. And while no one has a crystal ball, there are some striking similarities among the predictions. With sea level rise accelerating, millions of Americans will seek higher ground. In Florida, Orlando's population explodes as millions escape Florida's coasts, some moving to Atlanta or Dallas or Austin. Those same cities will also become home for hundreds of thousands leaving New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. In the Northeast, Americans trade the Atlantic coast for the freshwater coasts of the Great Lakes, leaving behind Boston and New York, creating a renaissance for Rust Belt cities like Buffalo, Cleveland, and Detroit. And far from the coasts, Americans face catastrophic floods along the Mississippi River, devastating drought in the Great Plains, and that forces millions toward Chicago, Minneapolis, and Denver. Out west, it's massive wildfires, drought, and prolonged heat waves. Those factors could make Sacramento, and even more likely, Seattle, the cities of choice. So it is possible that before the end of this century, Miami becomes a ghost town, and New York and LA are no longer America's biggest cities. By then, it could be Chicago and Seattle.
The other sort of worst case scenario here is that there's people who simply don't have the means to leave, particularly the elderly and those with lesser means, and they become trapped. And they become trapped in very high risky places, which, by the way, no longer have much of a tax base or an economic base to support the social services for many of these people.
So this gets complicated quickly and expensive, with soaring numbers of people living on the street because they can't pay rent. And then there's those with a home or an apartment. They start wondering how they can buy insurance. Oh, and consider that the cost of disasters linked to climate change has been skyrocketing over the last decade. That has been making insurance more and more expensive.
That probably means a lot of people won't be able to afford property insurance. So what happens then? Because you have a mortgage, but you can't afford property insurance anymore, what do?
This is a big problem. Ultimately, what we're looking at from the perspective of consumers is that insurance is likely to become a product for the rich. You have to give people some opportunity to understand that if they don't move away from the area, and the government and insurers are not going to be there.
So let that sink in. Your house gets destroyed, your entire life savings, and there's no insurance, and there's no help from the government either. You're what, homeless overnight? And it's not just PhDs at universities that are saying that, insurance companies are too.
Individuals and communities that are relying entirely on public disaster aid are going to suffer the greatest in the wake of a disaster.
Samantha Medlock has a resume ranging from an executive with insurance giant Willis Towers Watson,
affordable clean energy and new jobs,
to an environmental advisor to President Obama.
I think people have this expectation that well, this is my house, this is my community, and no matter what, we will rebuild. You hear that all the time in the wake of disasters.
we're going to rebuild, Joplin.
We'll rebuild. We'll definitely rebuild.
Oh yeah. But that's maybe not always the right response. Is that sort of where we're getting to?
Indeed. Yeah. And is that really the best use of federal taxpayer investment? Wouldn't it make more sense to focus on getting out ahead of the disaster? That's not what federal disaster aid was designed to do, and that's not how it's playing out for communities in the wake of these big storms.
Think of the Camp Fire, wiping the town of Paradise, California off the map.
You're going to be all right.
As levees like these were breached today,
Or Hurricane Katrina, forcing 1.5 million from their homes, 600,000 of them never came back. That is climate migration in America. It has been happening, but to better understand what will happen next, I went to Boulder, to the National Center for Atmospheric Research, to talk with James Doan.
A new horizon of climate science is to understand connected high-impact weather events, so events that can come in groups that we've never seen before. So like 2 hurricanes hitting the same location in 2 consecutive weeks that then may trigger flash floods over burn scars and this kind of thing.
It's essentially weather phenomena that we don't even have a name for right now.
It's exactly. So unique combinations of heat waves, flash floods that we've never seen in sort of close succession. We don't know what the impacts are.
That's a really important shift, that for humans to no longer be able to look at the past as an indicator of what tomorrow might be like. I mean, that's a huge shift in the way we just approach the world.
So, it's like driving a car, looking in a rearview mirror. You don't know what's coming up. These events are now happening in a world where there's more of us, a higher proportion of us live on vulnerable coastlines, say of California or Florida. And so we really live in a new era of climate risks that we haven't really tested before.
And those tests will only get tougher, more deadly, if we don't start taking action now. The difficult truth is that more and more places across America just won't be places where we can live anymore. And that's why we all need to start having conversations that we'd probably rather avoid. Conversations we have been avoiding. Conversations about where we call home.
And help folks understand you may be the last member of your family to occupy the old homestead.
And in our lifetimes, there will be great despair and great loss of life and great loss of wealth that will come with climate change. The real question is, those of lesser means, particularly in a society with growing inequality, how do they adapt? How can they afford to adapt? How can they even afford to move somewhere else to start a new life? That's the challenge ahead. And we have to make a decision about what we want to protect and what we want to let go.